Hello, everybody. Welcome to How to Succeed at Conferences. Please be aware that we are recording this session. Please use the chat to share your questions and comments throughout our presentation. And just to keep track, we'll be answering them at the end, and we'll stop recording at that point. So we are the co-chairs of the Atlanta Emerging Museum Professionals Network. We are a chapter of the National Emerging Museum Professionals Network, and we're so happy to be here with you today. My name is Heidi. My pronouns are they, him, her, and I am the Public Programs Coordinator for Fernbank Museum of Natural History. And I've been in the field for about 6 years. And I'll pass it to Ariana.
Thank you. I'm Ariana Yandel. I go by she, her pronouns. I am the manager of membership and donor services at the Atlanta History Center. And I've been in the field for around 7+ years. And I'll hand it over to Emily.
Hi, I am Emily Knight. My pronouns are she and her. I am the Museum Services Coordinator at the Bernard A. Zuckerman Museum of Arts located at KSU. And I have been in the museum field for about 8 years. And I will hand it off to Allison.
Hi, I am Allison Moore, and I am the Director of Community Engagement and Education at Oak Hill and North Berry Museum at Berry College. I have also been in the museum field for 7-ish years, and my pronouns are she, her, hers.
Welcome once again. So on behalf of myself, my fellow presenters, and our conference attendees, we want to acknowledge the land and its original caretakers. Ariana, Emily, Allison, and I reside on Muskogee Creek and Salagawaytie Cherokee lands in what is now claimed today as Georgia. This land grants us access to the beautiful ocean, mountains, and waterways, and gives us space to congregate together. And we display honor and gratitude to the caretakers and the first peoples to this land. Despite the government's continual attempt to erase Indigenous people and the genocidal founding of this country, Indigenous people still thrive in Georgia. More than 37,000 Indigenous people live in Georgia today. And the Rogers Convention Center, where this conference will be hosted in person, resides on Osage and Quapaw lands, which is now claimed as Rogers, Arkansas. We believe it is so important as emerging museum professionals to acknowledge the role past and present settler colonialism plays in the museum field. So we seek to create lasting change by actively listening and incorporating the many calls to action from our community of Indigenous museum professionals, such as Heather Miller at the Chicago American Indian Center, Joe Horsecapture at the Audrey, Brandy McDonald at the Museum of Us, and Jennifer Himmelreich at Peabody Essex Museum. And we encourage you to learn about the land you occupy and what actions you can do to go beyond land acknowledgement and towards lasting change. So we include a resource guide in our presentation. I will drop it in the chat right now. Thank you so much for holding space with us today. And I'll hand it over to Allison.
All right, so I'm just going to give y'all kind of a general overview of what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to start with just some general expectations for this session. We want to talk to you about why we as young professionals who have had some conference experience think it is important to find ways to attend a conference. We're going to talk about how to make a conference affordable to you and your individual needs, how to plan sessions based on and decide what you're going to be attending based on that plethora of offerings that is usually presented to you, the importance of and options for exploring the area that the conference is in, how to meet people and network, self-care, and making sure that you are treating yourself kindly while you are at a conference. We're going to talk about how to prepare your pitch so you can be ready to introduce yourself and kind of give the nuts and bolts of who you are in just a moment whenever you're interacting with new people at a conference, and just some general advice from us that didn't necessarily fit into any of the other places.
All right. So we want to emphasize this is a safe space. So please remember to be respectful of yourself and fellow participants. There will be a time where we practice our pitches at the end. We'll stop recording and we'll invite people to practice their own pitch about who they are, why they're at the museum, maybe a fun fact. So please remember to be respectful of yourself and others, and that includes myself. So if I say something that's not okay, please call us out and call us in. And as we share with each other, it is important to actively tune in to what folks are sharing. So please tune in to understand and not just to respond. And if you are normally someone who likes to share, take that time to observe. And if you are normally someone who likes to observe, take that time to share. And thank you so much for sharing this space. So like Allison said, the first thing we're going to be covering is why should you even attend a conference? Well, congratulations, you are already at a pre-session for a conference, so you're on the right track, in my humble opinion. Maybe you've already registered for SEMC, or maybe you're trying to decide whether to. You should. So basically, some of those perks as to why you should attend a conference is you can meet new people and build meaningful relationships. So say you're breaking into the field as an emerging museum professional, going to a conference is a great way to maybe meet potential mentors or get engaged with different affinity groups, or maybe you'll find friends who just share that same passion for museums as you do. Emily, who's presenting with me, I actually met her at one of the first SEMC conferences I went to, and now look where we are here. We're presenting, we're co-chairs and committee members for the National EMP Network and the Atlanta EMP Network. So you can really establish those great meaningful bonds when you go to conferences. AAM has some affinity groups, and I'm going to link them in the chat right now. So please check those out. They do meet virtually and at the conferences. And of course, SEMC also has some wonderful affinity groups that do great work. So please check out the EMPs of SEMC. So that's the Emerging Museum Professionals. You can find them on Facebook, so SEMC EMP. And then under the general SEMC Facebook, there is the Equity and Inclusion Action Team. And these guys are awesome. So they will post monthly meeting times on that Facebook page. And everybody is welcome. I've gotten some great advice personally from the folks in this group. Okay, another reason why you should attend conferences. It is a great way to advocate for yourself and to find a position that fits your passion. So remember that museums, they're made up of people, they're made up of us. We deserve to be compensated for our work. Museums don't exist without the people who are working in them. And a lot of the EMP sessions, often they'll talk about how to advocate for yourself. So maybe that's negotiating a salary in the interview process, or maybe it's trying to negotiate a salary raise. And all these things are so important when advocating for yourself and moving up in the field. And if you are just kind of dipping your toe and you're trying to find what department do I fit in, what position should I apply for, going to a conference is the perfect way to figure that out. So there might be someone who presents who is in a position that you're really interested in. You could connect with them, maybe, excuse me, maybe ask them what their background is in or the journey that they took to get to that particular position. And then you can use that as a resource and set your own goals so you can accomplish your dreams as well. So conferences are also great opportunities for just growing in the field. So as you do grow in the field, you might notice that sometimes it's not so much what you know, it's who you know. So by going to conferences, you can get tools in your tool belt just of that practical knowledge and the opportunity to meet people and mingle. So you can meet the people doing that work that you want to be more connected with. And networking is really the key to the conference experience. And we're going to be talking about that with those pitches and how to interact with people. And then lastly, Conferences inspire ideas and solutions which are super perfect for borrowing and collaborating. So if you come to a conference, be ready to be inspired. Get your notebook out, get those notes ready, because session topics can range from ethics and equity in the field to educational programming, collection practices, visitor service protocols, administration, community outreach, you name it. I'm willing to bet the topic is going to be covered in some shape, way, or form. So maybe there's a particular project that you want to propose at your museum and you're not sure how to get it started. Once again, you could run into someone who is doing a similar project or know someone who knows someone, and you get connected and voila, you might have a partner that you can work with to develop that project, or you have someone who can share those resources with you so you can get started. So I cannot stress enough how important it is to attend conferences. And I'll pass it off to Emily to talk a little bit more of affordability when it comes to conferences.
Fantastic. Thanks, Heidi. So ways to make conference attendance affordable. So we have a few creative solutions, one of which is volunteering. Volunteering is a fantastic way to give back at a conference, as well as gain either a discounted ticket rate or perhaps even free access. Typically, volunteering for one shift will get you access for one day to a conference, but the more time you're able to donate, the more free access you will get. This is also a great way to engage with presenters and attendees in a different way, not just sitting and listening to sessions, but actually providing an active role. For example, at AAM in Atlanta, many years ago when I was still a student, I volunteered every single day and loved it. I got free access to the entire conference, and I spent my volunteer shifts overseeing and shadowing sessions. So making sure, keeping time for the presentation to make sure there was an opportunity for question and answers, helping people, facilitating that question and answer if necessary, handing out surveys to make sure the participants who are attending the sessions give that valuable feedback back to the conference at the end of it so they can make the next year's conference that more meaningful. I also did a completely different shift that I wasn't really expecting would be so great. I was helping with bus transportation, which doesn't sound super sexy, but it was actually probably the best, just organic way to meet people. I met so many different people from all different sectors of the museum field who were just waiting and helping. I was helping navigate, and I got the opportunity to have small bursts of interaction with a multitude of people, which was awesome. Later at the conference, I'd run into those people and we'd have a great connection and starting point. So you never know what kind of shifts you could be assigned and the ways it could benefit you in the long run. All of us have volunteered at conferences in the past and can attest that no matter what role you fulfill, you'll have the opportunity to network with people and gain some valuable experience. I also walked away from that volunteering experience at my very first museum conference ever feeling more confident and more able to network in our field at the conference and otherwise. So especially for first-time attendees, I highly recommend volunteering as a way to ease into the conference experience. It's also a great resume builder. It never hurts to say you volunteered at that conference on your resume. Since then, I volunteered at lots of other conferences, and I have to say, highly encourage you to participate. SEMC is happy to have volunteers at conferences, including Arkansas. So if you're interested, just email Zinnia or a different staff member about the opportunity. They are committed to helping find the right volunteer placement for each volunteer. So please email them if you're interested. Expectations versus reality. So I'm sure if you've ever volunteered for any event at any time at a nonprofit or otherwise, sometimes you're not stationed where you want to be. Maybe you're at a workshop that's offsite away from the main conference venue, or maybe you're just shadowing a session that isn't your preferred session for that time slot. We know that happens. Make the best out of the circumstances that you were given. Network with your fellow volunteers who are sharing your same station, and know that you're contributing in a valuable way to the conference experience. Also, a great point, if you know someone else at the conference who's going to the session, we like to, coordinate in advance and say, hey, you're going to that session. I wish I could be there. I'm not able to attend. If you're taking notes, do you think we could meet up at the end of the conference or later at a different day and swap notes? So then you still get some of that fantastic information shared at the session, even though you weren't able to go. Scholarships is another great way to make conference going more affordable. There are several scholarship and award opportunities at SEMC and at general conferences. We encourage you to visit the website and research in advance to find out those opportunities. SEMC is amazing, and they offer 10 travel scholarships to museum professionals at any level, which is fantastic. So their levels include student, entry level, people who like our EMPs who are between 5 and 10 years, mid-career professionals, historic house museum professionals, African-American museum professionals, professionals from Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, as well as many others. Each of those travel scholarships gets you registration for SEMC for free, which is, gosh, I think if you don't get the early bird discount, more than $400 that you would save, as well as a $750 stipend to help with gas or transportation, your airfare, hotel accommodation. So that money can really go a long way. That's just some of the scholarships available. Again, if you're attending a difference conference that isn't SEMC, please go to their website or take a look at local and regional opportunities. There are, of course, other creative ways to make conference going more affordable. So like I mentioned, early bird discounts are a huge, huge benefit. Go on the website early and register so that you can get, I think it's more than $100 discount at SEMC, but there's a lot of other early bird discounts. You can also sign up for the room block. So if you're able to do that early, SEMC as well as other museum conferences work with the venue to ensure that there's X amount of rooms available for conference goers at a nice discounted rate. So if you're able to get in early, you can make accommodations and save some money. You can also get a roommate. We highly recommend contacting and communicating with colleagues and friends in the area to see, are you going to SEMC? Fantastic. Perhaps we could room together and then split the cost again. If the conference is in your general area where you could drive to, you could also see if they'd be interested in carpooling. So save some funds that way as well. Another great example for cutting costs for the hotel accommodations during a conference day is that the National EMP Network offers roommate setups. So at particular conferences that NEMPN is going to have representation at, they'll do something called the roommate roundup, which is really, really cool. So they'll match people who have similar interests in room accommodations. So you can find a roommate that way. EMP House in the past has found like an Airbnb locally in the area, bringing together all EMPs and offering affordable housing. So please check out NEMPN's website and EMP House opportunities. Make sure also that you're communicating with your museum leadership or development team to see if there are any professional development funds available to you. I've worked at lots of different types of institutions, from small to large, that have been able to offer different amounts. Maybe they'll be able to pay for your registration. Maybe they'll only be able to offer you a small stipend, but it can't hurt to ask. So please ask museum leadership if there are funds available to you that will help you get to the conference. Professional award opportunities. So oftentimes the award opportunities are not to financial benefit, so keep that in mind, but they're fantastic things to put on your resume and a great way to just promote and share colleagues' work with others. So there's a few that SEMC offer that are listed on this slide here. There's one particular one that I want to highlight, which is the Emerging Museum Professionals Award. I love that SEMC does this. A lot of other museum conferences do too. So this award goes to people who are new in the field, who have been here for 5 or less years, who are doing amazing things for museums in the Southeast. It's fantastic. It's wonderful to be recognized as someone who's contributing to the field. And I have to just toot their horn. Heidi won this award last year, actually. So it's amazing. It's great to see EMPs being honored in this way. We highly recommend visiting the websites and seeing what opportunities for awards and scholarships and volunteering are available at the conference you're attending, whether it be SEMC or otherwise. And I will hand it off to Ariana for some session planning.
So there are a few ways to break down your whole week or the days that you're deciding to attend a conference. First and foremost, you just have to spend some time with the program. You'll want to make note of the sessions that you should go to, basically the sessions that are primarily relevant to your current role or position. You have a little bit more freedom here if you are a student or are just new to the field, and you can kind of be a little bit more creative. But if you are employed by an institution, it would be good to start there and see what kind of sessions are being offered to get that valuable feedback from people who are in your shoes. This will also help cover your bases if you need to report back on these sessions to your leadership or your team at large, or if you need to report back to fulfill part of your scholarship, if you get a scholarship to attend. After that point, you've mapped a few of those out. It's time to get a little bit more creative. What are some topics that you're really interested in or passionate about that might be otherwise outside your comfort zone or outside your job description? Topics that you're passionate about could lead you down a path for finding really creative solutions to something you could do in your current role or a role that you could potentially fulfill. For instance, I have a colleague who learned about this amazing partnership between the Georgia Public Library Systems and arts and culture institutions in Atlanta by going to one of these kinds of sessions randomly that was outside of her normal kind of job description, if you will. And through that, she learned that basically, the Georgia Public Library System is treating admission to certain museums like a book that you could check out for a family, and you can visit those institutions and then return the pass like a book. And it's a great way to be accessible and to reach different audiences. And she was totally blown away by it. And since that point, implemented this partnership for her own institution, which opened so many doors. And, if she had not gotten out of her comfort zone, she would have never known that existed. And from my standpoint, I can also speak from experience of getting out the comfort zone. I attended a session at the most recent American Museum Membership Conference where it was just about, transitioning systems, the super glamorous life of moving from one system to another. But not only was it super insightful and my notebook was absolutely full, I immediately made a connection with the presenters via LinkedIn after. And now my institution's in a position where we actually want to reach out to the consulting firm that worked with that whole session. So I've made that connection. We were inspired, we've talked, and that particular reference has come to be very useful at a later date and is helping our institution. So definitely getting out of your comfort zone is super important for planning what things you're going to go to. And also for your session planning, just don't forget about your breaks. Depending on where your sessions are located, they could be near each other, opposite sides. Just make sure you have a little bit of buffer time in between things. So when you're going to sessions, it might be easy to fall into this pattern of just kind of sitting, listening, taking notes, and then going about your day. But, as Heidi mentioned earlier, that like some of the best parts about being at a conference or being around your people, we're all here, we're all passionate about what we do, we're all probably a little bit of the same kind of nerdy in different areas. So you really want to take advantage of being in those spaces and participating with those around you. Do you know who your speakers are for the sessions you're going to attend? If you don't, it might be, when you're planning, it might be good to look them up on LinkedIn just to get a little bit more about them. And you'd be surprised to find out who on LinkedIn has connections with the speakers that could come out to be more useful later down the line. And depending on the situation, you might have an opportunity to introduce yourself to the speaker, or at least ask follow-up questions in the session. And, if someone in your session asks a super dope question and you want to talk to them more, you can always see if they linger and try to introduce yourself and just, thank them for asking that question and make that connection there too. So the art of asking questions is your best friend. So during a session, when you're writing down notes, you'll kind of try to make some points to yourself probably of things you're interested in or want to get more feedback on. It's important to note that when you're trying to think about questions to ask, it's not only a way to just, get one-to-one information, but as a way to engage with the space. So if you kind of find yourself as a person who is more reserved on asking questions, you can also potentially have an option of going up to the speakers after the session if time permits and they've kind of verbally made that an option to you for all of y'all to go ahead and just have that one-on-one conversation if you feel more comfortable doing so. And if you're like me sometimes who can get in this kind of deer in headlights state before you even get to a session, you might want to draft some questions even beforehand. That might just be some good broad stroke questions that you can use in a variety of situations. So by broad strokes, I mean things or questions like, how did you get into this field? If you could give your younger self advice on being in this field, what would that be? What are some challenges that this topic can present to someone who's new to the field? And what is your favorite part about being in blank your position? Those kinds of questions can be brought up in a variety of situations, and that might help you start to engage with the space. Building out your calendar is a little daunting too after you've blocked off all your sessions that you're thinking about going to. I recommend either using a planner or Google Calendars, just kind of get a visual scope of what you have going on. It's also helped to visualize maybe your breaks, your meals, evening excursions on there, happy hours. That way it's all in one place and you can kind of see a full view of what could potentially happen. So there's definitely quite a few things happening in Arkansas, and Allison will speak to that later on. So if you note those things in one location, it'll also help you pivot if you want to make room for last minute changes or things you learn about as the conference goes. And definitely mapping out those breaks. I can not emphasize that strongly enough. It's super important. So if it's all in one space, it'll definitely help you later on. When you get to the conference, I always recommend, I think we all recommend doing a lap around your space and just getting yourself overall familiar with the space. Nothing worse than not knowing where you're going or not knowing how to charge your phone last minute or where the coffee is. If you get to the conference early, or if you're checking into your hotel, maybe after you check in is a good time, or maybe if you're an early bird, you decide maybe in the morning while you're getting coffee somewhere just to kind of do a brief lap. However it works for you, it's definitely good just to kind of get the lay of the land. Where are the charging stations? What are the polar opposite conference rooms in your space? Getting all that first glance down will save you from being confused later on. And hey, it might even help you be a buddy to someone else who's looking like a deer in headlights. And if you are on the fence on something on your schedule, on the plan you've made, you can always just sit in the back of these sessions or the workshops. That way, especially if it's a topic that you're unsure what, by the conference title, what it might be. If you're kind of on the fence, you sit in the back, you find out a few minutes in, it might not be what you're looking for. By being in the back, you're going to be less disruptive for the physical space that you're in. And that'll just allow you to kind of figure out what your next move is going to be. And on that note, I'm going to pass it over to Allison.
Awesome. Thanks, Ari. So one of the other things that I wanted to talk about outside of just your average sessions is that one of the coolest things about attending conferences is the fact that a lot of times they bring you to places that you wouldn't have normally visited. So I would say one of my favorite places that I went to a conference in Detroit several years ago, which is not really a place that I don't have family anywhere near there. It's not a place I'd ever considered in like a, just a fun trip kind of thing, but I just had the best time exploring that city. And I think it's always important to remember when you're attending a museum conference is that one of the best ways to learn about museums is to visit them. And so it is a very valuable use of your time to take time in your schedule to go explore town a little bit. I think sometimes we can feel a little guilty because we've got this absolutely packed session calendar that we feel like we need to stay in the convention center at all times. But sometimes especially if there's a place walking distance, taking time, if you've got a hour-long area where you don't have a session and you just want to go stretch your legs, if you're able to go visit another local museum, that is also a great learning opportunity. I can say from experience when I was at AAM in Phoenix as a grad student, some friends and I one day, there was an afternoon that there wasn't a lot of sessions we were interested in, so we took some time and we went over to the Heard Museum in Phoenix. And while I was there, I saw this absolutely incredible exhibit that ended up influencing my, my senior thesis. So it's always a great way to just kind of explore what those towns have to offer. So two kind of, I feel like, big ways to do this is one, as I said before, taking time to do it on your own. You can grab some colleagues that you're visiting the conference with, grab some new friends and just be like, hey, I'm going to walk over to this place down the street this afternoon and see if anyone would like to join you. But most of the time, especially at museum conferences, offsite events are part of the schedule. So that's a great time to go because they are good networking opportunities in that there's like an activity involved, which sometimes can be helpful in talking to people when there are, things going on around you to talk about. So I know usually at SEMC, and I've seen this structure at a lot of conferences that I have gone to, there will be tours kind of at the beginning and at the end of the conference. Those are usually things that require pre-registration and sometimes require an additional fee. So that's just something to pay attention to make sure that if you are hoping to go on a tour, make sure that you are pre-registered for it if you need to be. So I know that there's going to be tours during SEMC of the Ozark Highlands Nature Center, the Museum of Native American History, the Pea Ridge National Military Park, and the Walmart Museum. So all of that is stuff that you would be able to go to with other colleagues. And those type of offerings are very common at museum conferences. The other thing is those evening events, which I feel like sometimes there's a little bit of a tendency to want to skip them because by the end of the day, you are just so tired. But those are great ways to see some places and also talk to some other people. And as Zinnia just said in the chat, all of the ones at SEMC are going to be free. Usually there's transportation provided to them. And so I will say that some of my most memorable conversations and experiences have been at those evening events at conferences. There are lasting connections I have made just because I kind of ended up at the same table as somebody and we started chatting. So those are definitely things that I would consider not miss because you get the kind of double benefit of visiting a local museum, getting to know it, and also getting a kind of built-in networking opportunity that has kind of conversation starters all around you in this space. Also, there's usually food, which is always a benefit to things like this. So another thing to note is that a lot of times in these towns, when they know that museum conferences are coming to town, you can sometimes get into a lot of museums for free with your conference badge. I've been to some conferences that this has been advertised, some that it was just kind of a lucky accident. So if it isn't listed anywhere in the conference, schedule, don't necessarily count on it, but it's just a good thing to know that it may be a little more affordable to explore the areas around than you might think. Another thing kind of adjacent to this is that something that I started doing fairly recently in my conference attendance is taking the time before the conference to research restaurants that are in walking distance of the area and just kind of making a general note on your phone. We have all been in the situation before where you're with like a group of people and you need to go eat somewhere and everyone's just kind of standing around scrolling Google and tossing things out until a decision is made. And so having some of those things ready to go can give you the time to research and see, especially if you're a big foodie, if there's something that you're really excited about going to, you can go ahead and have that plan in place. And it can also be another extension of networking. I can say at VSA a couple of years ago, the Visitor Studies Association conference, some friends and I were interested in going to this like deli that we had heard about, and we were having a conversation with a couple of other people, and we were hungry, ready for lunch. We ended up just inviting them to come with us, and we had a great time and we're able to connect with those people through that. So it's a great way to extend conversations. If you're interested in going into like a mealtime or a break time, if you want to, invite someone to go to a coffee shop with you, and having those that research done in advance just helps save time and make your life a little easier when you are in the position when you're like, oh wow, I need food right now or I'm gonna scream at somebody. So all in all, I think it's just one of the greatest things about conferences is just finding yourself in these new spaces. And I want to encourage everyone to never feel guilty about taking time away from sessions to take advantage of the location that you're in. So, and I am going to pass it back off to Ari.
Thank you. So in terms of meeting people, it may or may not be your personal goal for your first conference to do that, but every conference after that should be on your priority list. The value in the of a conference is not only in the expertise of the people presenting in sessions and the workshops, and it's also in those passionate museum folk around you and the people that are going to be with you on all these excursions. So the easiest place to start is taking note who's in the session around you. I know it's really easy to get in a silo. You have your people here from your museum, you get in this little bubble, you get sit in the same sessions together. But try maybe taking a seat next to different people. Don't go into like the isolated corner. Maybe put yourself more sitting around other folk in a session. And, there's always that awkward waiting time before things start, and that's an easy time to just, quickly introduce yourself to the people around you and find out like this little things like, oh, where's the best coffee around here? Or you can just say, hey, how did you hear about this session? Really easy way to kind of get a gauge of who's around you. For the networking events, so a lot of the networking events are kind of built to kind of move themselves, as Allison mentioned, like there's a lot of opportunities and things to talk about in those moments of engaging with the city that might help move those kind of conversational moments along. But definitely taking advantage of those is a great way to do so. So if you haven't thought about it yet, hopefully that's one takeaway from this whole talk is you go to at least one evening session. So there's spaces all throughout the conference to match both your energy, if you're more introverted or extroverted, but also just to engage again with your city, like Allison was saying. For conversation starters, in many situations, they will pose themselves naturally. So if you're in a session, obviously there for a common reason, but it's a great way to kind of show your personality a little bit. So if you have a tote bag about Jane Austen that you just haven't been able to break out yet, or you're a pin or two or a cool tie that you just haven't been able to break out, it's a good opportunity to do so. It might be a fun way to kind of break the ice or to meet people in line for things. It's always a great way to start conversation. So in the chat earlier, someone mentioned about business cards. Business cards are super important too. And in the moment, everything feels fun and organic and awesome. You're talking to people, but the minute you get back to your normal routine at home, I don't know what it is, but the brain, it just goes blank sometimes. And it's hard to get some of those key details that seem so natural in the moment. Having a business card is a great way to make sure that you have something to give and something to get that can help jog that memory for that future connection. So make sure to bring some with you. It's your ticket to a follow-up, and it's really easy to get them. So if you have an institution that produces them, I recommend checking in with the department that produces them. Maybe it's your human resources department, maybe it's your marketing team. Reach out to them, figure it out, and figure out what the kind of cadence is to get those printed off for you. Maybe it takes a few months, maybe it takes 2 weeks, kind of depends, on a combination of a print turnaround for whoever you're printing with, but also could be potentially more time intensive if your institution waits for multiple people to need them. So just to take care of those factors, make sure you just check in with your institution. But thankfully, it is extremely easy to make them yourselves in a pinch, especially if you're a student or you're unaffiliated with an institution. I recommend, going to Amazon or Staples and getting some of those Avery sheets. They already have a template associated with them that you could pull up on your browser. You could edit the template and then just print them off with a printer and take them with you. So if you don't have a printer, it's time to reach out to your friends. But it's really not that daunting, and it'll just serve you so well to give it. And then by the end of the day, when you have all your business cards you've collected, I would also recommend maybe making a note somewhere in your notes about that interaction, or associate that name with something, either if it was a casual conversation or related to the session. That way you just have, that, again, an additional layer of follow-up that kind of puts the name to a situation, so you don't end up with just a card and nothing to associate it with. I'll pass it on to Heidi.
Thank you. So self-care at conferences, we've been touching on it a little bit, but we really need to focus on your own self-care. So at conferences, there are endless possibilities when it comes to your schedule. So you need to carve out that time to just rejuvenate, relax. You've been processing all this information, meeting all these new people. You need time to decompress. So it might seem, pretty obvious, but please hydrate and eat. Sometimes you'll be like, oh my gosh, it's 3 o'clock. I haven't even eaten. I haven't even had a drop of water today, only coffee. So if you need to, I recommend bringing backup snacks. So maybe like a protein bar or something like that. And pro tip, reusable water bottle. Humans, we do need water, approximately 6 to 8 ounces of water a day. So keep that in mind. And just get your energy going, and it will keep you ready to keep going to the next session or what have you. On my first day at a conference, like Ariana was talking about, kind of get your first glance, the lay of the land. I like to scope out where the food and beverage options are. So usually there's a cafe or a coffee shop or something very close by, if not inside the hotel or convention center. At a previous SEMC in Charleston, there was a Publix right across the street. And so I would go get a pub sub, maybe get some of the prepackaged food, and just chill at this park that was also across the street, and just get out and breathe and take some moments to decompress. So that's getting into the quiet spaces, whether that's indoors or outdoors. Conferences can be overwhelming, especially if you are more introverted. Maybe I would recommend bringing some fidget toys if you need, and just find those quiet places on your first day. Be like, note, okay, there's a charger right there, or outlet so I can charge right there. That's going to be one of my spots potentially for a break. And you can use those breaks as times to write those identifiers on the business notes, to make those little notes about a person you just met and how you might want to collaborate or follow up on something with them. Just jot it down in your notebook before your brain is just dialing back into shutdown mode. It's really nice to just clear your brain. You got it down in your notebook, you have it in your business cards, and now you can keep track of interactions and just breathe. And of course, you'll want to have some comfortable clothing. That is so important. Make sure to wear something that you're comfortable in. Comfortable shoes are a must. You'd be surprised how much movement you get at a conference. It can be a lot. And sometimes the session rooms or museums are a little bit cold. So I recommend bringing a light sweater And when it comes to general attire, it really varies. Some folks might have a suit and tie. That's what they're the most comfortable in. Maybe other people are wearing pants and a flannel, or a skirt and a museum themed shirt, or maybe just, your casual blazer and jeans combo. It's really whatever outfit that you feel the most comfortable in and what you feel like expresses yourself. So the key is comfort. And when it comes to having an escape plan buddy, sometimes conference events can go rather late, and maybe you found yourself in a conversation you're not sure how to leave, and you just want to go home and take a nice rest before you wake up the next day. That is where your escape plan buddy comes in handy. You can give each other the signal, whatever that might be. That means, hey, I need some rest. Please, let's go. And generally just checking in with the folks who you might have come with, or people you might have befriended, that can really help with feeling burnt out. Just checking in, making sure that your friends and you are on the same page is a really good thing to do. And remember, you want to wake up feeling refreshed and ready for the next day of the conference. So don't go a little too heavy. If you can, pull up on the reins and make sure you are getting rest before the next day. And you also do not have to do everything that your friends are doing. Just like how Ariana was talking about sitting next to people you may not know in sessions, feel free to go to sessions where you don't know anyone at all. Branch off from those established groups that you have, because that can lead to professional relationships outside of your circle, which is really going to benefit you when you are networking. All right, so Emily was talking about getting a room and maybe in the hotel block. What's really great for that is getting a complimentary room buddy. So having basics, being able to afford your food, your lodging, that's really important to well-being, right? So I really recommend to split costs when you can. If you decide to get a different hotel by chance, make sure it is in walking distance. You don't want to be kicking yourself. You're like, oh my gosh, we have to get in a Uber, or we need to take the public transit. We're not going to be there in time. So make sure that it is in walking distance if you can do that. Something that was great, my friend Lamise and I recently went to Boston to the AAM conference, and we stayed in a hotel that was walking distance from the convention center. And we actually met people who were also going to the conference, and we befriended them over continental breakfast. So don't, I would say definitely check out the hotel bars and those continental breakfasts, because you can spark up some conversation and create good relationships that way as well. And also know your transportation options. So in a similar way that Allison was talking about, everyone standing around looking at their phone trying to find the best option, if you already have that pre-planned in your back pocket, it takes away all that stress, and it is a way to travel with ease. So if you need to do a share ride provider, I would recommend taking turns with a friend or colleague on paying. Or if you want to explore the city a little further, I recommend getting public transportation passes. And as Emily had spoke about before, a lot of the time conferences have free transportation options. So just look really carefully on those websites and on the program forms, because those are the sorts of things that are so valuable and save you some bucks. Something that I do recommend if you take the transportation that's provided by the conference is to set reminders on your phone, because usually there's a set time frame. These 3 buses are leaving at this time. These 3 buses are going to bring you back to the hotels at this time. And if you miss it, then you're on your own. So definitely use your phone to set reminders so you can get that free ride back to your lodging. And when you are taking that conference bus transportation, it's another great way to meet people. So try to space out from the folks that you know and sit next to someone new, and you can spark up a conversation. So yes, do please take in consideration yourself. And also if you've come with some people, just double check and keep in mind that we all are human and we need breaks and just time to relax. All right, so a little bit more advice from us, Allison is going to share.
So to kind of wrap up some of our advice before we go on into our slightly more interactive portion, these are just kind of some general things that we still wanted to share. We did kind of mention this before, but don't miss the evening events and extra offerings. Things like the specialty lunches, like there's usually, curator's lunch, director's lunch, stuff like that. That can be a great time to meet people and then have that built-in connection with them. There's also sometimes just looking through the schedule, you'll see workshops and things. I'm very sorry, my cat just fell off the table, but she's fine. So workshops and things can also be a little bit different than just sitting in a session and can be great ways to communicate with people and everything. I know that at the Washington Museum Association conference a couple of years ago, I participated in a Registrars to the Rescue program where they brought in a whole bunch of collections management professionals, and we went and volunteered at this tiny historical society, and we actually inventoried their entire collection in like 3 hours. And it was so much fun. I met a lot of great people. And I believe SEMC has a similar event, but I'm blanking on what it's called right now. So hopefully someone can drop that in the chat for me. But yes, perfect. Thank you. Hands-on help. So things like that are great ways to again, meet people and have that kind of interactive networking opportunities. One, stay in touch with the people you meet. I usually take some time after a conference to kind of sit down and like add everybody on LinkedIn. That can just be a really easy way to remember that you have a connection with this person. And I know that I have reached out to people that I had a conversation with after, sometimes I think once like a year after a conference, I reached out to somebody. So I've reached out because I had had a conversation with someone about something that I was then facing at work that I wanted their advice on. I reached out to someone once because I saw a job posting at their institution and I wanted to know if they had any kind of lowdown on like what the position was. So just kind of coming up with your own system to make sure you can stay in touch with people and keep track of them so you can kind of build these initial interactions into more lasting relationships. Another thing is not necessarily for your first conference, but for later ones is submit a proposal and be a presenter. You don't have to have had 25 years of experience in order to be a presenter. I feel like we're a great example of that. It's essentially, you just need to find some people that are willing to share ideas and collaborate with you. And so it's also just a great way to meet other people and to kind of contribute to the field as a whole. Kind of with that is pay attention to deadlines because they will come up earlier than you think. So session proposals, the awards and scholarships Emily was talking about earlier, all of those deadlines start coming up, I'd say somewhere between 3 to 6 months before the conference. So if there's a conference you are planning on attending, I definitely recommend following them on social media, signing up for their newsletter, because those kind of dates are usually mentioned like a million times before they come up. And so those are, so just make sure you're keeping an eye out for them. So last but not least for us is that, especially if you are an emerging professional, which is a very vague term, so it's kind of a self-identifying thing is whether or not you were emerging in the field, is to join the EMP community and connect with us across various platforms. I'll drop some links in the chat in just a minute, but if you are in the Atlanta area, we have an Atlanta EMP Facebook group, which is a really great space for people asking for advice, posting jobs at their institutions. We have fairly regular events, all of that kind of stuff. SEMC also has a broader emerging museum professional group. And then there's the National Emerging Museum Professional Group Facebook page, which is kind of like a listserv in a way where a lot of people are asking for advice and sharing stories. And it's a really great place and a great community to get support from. And sometimes it's a great place to meet people before you go to a conference. Fairly regularly, people will post in there, hey, I'm going to this conference. Is anyone else going? So you can kind of make those connections beforehand. The NEMPN also has a Mighty Networks page, and it attempts to slowly move some things away from Facebook. So that's another great place to kind of coordinate with everybody. So I'm going to pull up those links and drop them in the chat, and then pass it off to Emily.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Allison. All right, so now we've gotten to the point where we're going to talk a little bit about preparing your pitch, and then